Well, that's the last time I'm having a cup of tea from one of those kettles. Hello and welcome to my first impressions of Inside Number 9 Series 6, where today we'll be discussing Episode 3, Lip Service. So, get yourself comfortable, check your caramelised biscuits are well within their sell-by date, and let's talk about it. So, this was another COVID-friendly episode set in a very small space with a tiny cast, and it's another excellent episode at that. It almost feels like Pemberton and Shearsmith get even more creative the more limitations are placed upon them, and this series so far has been a true testament to their writing talents. We got a great mix of comedy, drama, and some fairly dark moments that kept us on the edge of our seats throughout. And oh, the twists! We'll be discussing those in my spoiler section later on. Don't worry, I'll give the heads up before we start, but for now we'll look a little bit more at the characters and the initial setup. While we get the establishing shot of the hotel at number 9 across the road, lip service actually takes place within room 612 of the considerably grottier Medway Hotel. And while I can't take credit for spotting this myself, when you add those numbers together, you get number 9. Not sure how many people noticed that because it very nearly passed me by. This might be one of several hidden 9s peppered throughout the series, like the one in the Sphinx's crossword puzzle, and another that was very recently pointed out to me in the comments. In The Devil of Christmas, we end with scene 18B. B is the second letter of the alphabet, and when you divide 18 by 2, you get 9. Thanks to Crofty for that observation, and thank you Thomas for pointing out the hotel room. The set is furnished with some dingy, horrible decor that wouldn't look out of place at the Denton's house. Having said that, I don't think Harvey would have appreciated the used tissue and magazine, no doubt used by the previous occupant in order to pleasure himself to wicked extremes. I don't know if anyone out there listening has ever experienced the horror of discovering someone else's personal items in a hotel room, but it's pretty gross and I really feel it for Steve's character Felix during this scene. Felix is clearly going through some inner turmoil, the nature of which becomes apparent later. Reece Shearsmith plays Eric Muller, the manager of the Medway Hotel, and gives us his second ridiculous European accent of Series 6. I was a bit surprised by this because comedy German accents are normally the forte of Steve Pemberton. Maybe Reece wanted a turn for a change, or maybe they thought one of Steve's German characters would have stolen the show. Hey, they could have ended up calling the episode Hair Lip Service. Our other main character, Iris, played by Sian Clifford, has been hired by Felix in order to spy on his wife, whom he suspects is having an affair, and who happens to be staying in the hotel across the road. Iris has a talent for lip reading, hence the name of the episode, and she gives us a fascinating explanation of how this works, along with things like context clues and body language. She also sets us up for the fact that lip reading isn't always accurate, as you'll already know if you've ever watched those bad lip reading dubs on YouTube, or listened to one of their insanely catchy music videos. Iris is great at her job, as demonstrated in one brilliant scene involving a phone call, and comes across as a very warm and funny character who becomes sympathetic towards Felix. More information is revealed as they get chatting, but we start to suspect that nothing is really quite as it seems. While this is happening, we also have the constant interruptions of Mr. Muller, who is cracking down on the use of his hotel rooms for prostitution and is absolutely choking for a bust. It's quite similar to one episode of Fawlty Towers where Basil is trying to prove that one of the guests is sneaking a girl into his room. This adds some comic relief as Mr. Muller really starts to get on Felix's case, and also tension as the stakes rise and he and Iris really can't afford to get caught. Performance-wise, everybody nailed it this week, especially with a number of drastic tonal shifts. This is also reflected in Christian Henson's musical score, which really ties the whole episode together. I was especially impressed by Steve Pemberton's emotional roller coaster and basically every single second of Sian Clifford's performance. And yes, I did get around to watching Fleabag, I absolutely loved it, and it was very nice to see her taking on a completely different role. Overall, Lip Service is an episode that keeps you guessing throughout, and I for one was very surprised at how it all turned out. So now, as promised, we're going to get into some spoiler talk, because yeah, there are a lot of them this time. If you haven't seen Lip Service yet, then I'd recommend leaving this part out until later on, otherwise, here we go. Well, that got dark again this week, didn't it? So much for Steve surviving episode 2, only to be caught in the act with a hotel hairdryer. I mean, those things never quite work the way you want them to, do they? And no matter how many times you've seen it, there's still nothing quite as grim as seeing one of your favourite actors being zipped up in a body bag. Upon rewatch, I also noted the following line from Felix. "I'll be gone in half an hour and you can clean up all the bodily fluids I've been spraying in here." Not quite what he meant originally, but how horribly true. It was also upon rewatch that the character of Iris, if that is her real name, really started to shine. Once you become aware of her motives, you can really see how she takes things to a whole new level. She's just that little bit too charming to be real, has a quirky response for everything, and you feel like she has a multitude of answers pre-prepared for any given situation. Just look at how Felix discovering the flash drive got her to reveal her true motives. Even the name Iris feels like a little bit of an in-joke. Not only does she have her eye on the whole situation through the binoculars, she's also had her eye on Felix the whole time, although not quite in the way that she claimed. Now, there was one element of the episode I never fully bought into, and that was the apparent romance. It just seemed to blossom very suddenly towards someone who was just a sea of red flags. I mean, there was the lying, the shouting, the throwing objects across the room, and the fact that the guy is basically stalking his ex-partner. I know people are perfectly capable of ignoring the signs, but for me it just felt like too much of a stretch. Plus the idea that an expert lip reader who was perfectly happy on her own would fall for a guy she'd never met before and tracked him down just because she felt sorry for him. Yeah, I didn't quite buy it on my first viewing. I don't think that's a fault in the writing, as Iris was obviously telling Felix what he wanted to hear, plus there are probably actual legit rom-coms out there with far worse setups. Maybe I should put it down to effective seeding, as if the creators were trying to hint to us that something was up, or maybe it was just my cold, cynical heart refusing to accept a bit of charm. Other than that, I thought the pacing was great, the tone could have shifted in any direction, and the news broadcast in the hotel television at the end gave us a wonderful final twist. One thing that did keep me guessing until the very end was whether or not Mr. Mueller was in on the conspiracy, which I think would have worked either way. And now I'm wondering if Rhys has any more silly accents in store for the rest of Series 6. So that was Lip Service. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments, feel free to share your own hotel horror stories, and remember to like and subscribe for more Number 9 content. I also highly recommend checking out this week's Inside Number 9 podcast, which also looks at the origin of the Psychoville episode David and Maureen, definitely one of the highlights of that series. And we'll be back again next week for episode 4, Hurry Up and Wait, which straight away has reminded me of an old Blondie song, and now that's going to be in my head all day. Also, one last thing, I don't care if it is a real word, irregardless is a stupid, pointless word that shouldn't exist. Thank you for listening, and I'll be chatting to you all again very soon.